Mark your arcs. Don't trust terrain. We've got blind edges every 20 meters. The order cracked through Theron Vak's comms as the canyon ahead bled smoke. He ducked under a jagged outcrop, boots skidding on ash-covered shale. Dust clung to every seam in his armor. Wind carried the burn of scorched resin, the aftermath of Volcari thermite mines, buried too shallow to hide. Theron, check right flank, barked. Lieutenant Darn Exel, crouched behind a twisted half-wall of collapsed sensor mesh. Theron angled his rifle and leaned out, scanning through his helmet's visor display, feed jittering with electromagnetic static. A shadow broke from behind a split boulder too smooth in its motion. He fired once. The Volcari fell silently, limbs stiff before impact. No time to linger. He dragged his breath back under control and waved a signal forward. They were 12 minutes past their planned extraction. Terran vanguard units were still pushing toward the relay node buried beneath the Volcari plateau. Above them, orbital telemetry was long gone, disrupted by high-altitude interference waves. Not even Earth's long-range relays had pushed through in 3 hours. That left only instincts, training, and the promise of Allied support. The Tarnik had fallen back, supposedly repositioning. Theron hadn't seen one of them in 30 minutes. A harsh crack, like bone striking steel, rattled through the canyon. Thermopulse from the west, followed by shouts. "Not Terran, Coalition fire team just broke contact," said Jaron Velk over the line. His voice rasped with heat and urgency, not fear. No call signs. They pulled. Theron froze mid-stride. Pulled from where? Everywhere. Their captain's gone dark. Looks like they were extracted. But we're still locked in. Exactly. He pressed into a split in the canyon wall as another shell thumped somewhere behind him. The rock shook with each impact, fine grit falling like dry rain. The sky above, normally a pale shimmer of copper haze, was now blackened, blotched by smoke pillars and aerial debris. A shape arced overhead, no contrail, just a flicker and vanish. Stealth drone or satellite loss. No one had time to check. Theron keyed to the shared network. Empty. The Tarnik channels had gone mute. No pings, no status tags, no fallback markers. "They left us," said someone quietly across the vanguard line. "Just cut loose." No chatter. Theron snapped. "Push forward. Relays 20 clicks. Then we turn ghosts." A signal flare hissed above a nearby ridge, green light bleeding through ash fog. The last Terran unit was regrouping there. He broke from cover and sprinted across open ground, knees buckling from the terrain's uneven tilt. Every stone threatened to break. The air carried the copper tang of discharged coils and cooling composite. A low whistle shrieked through the canyon. A Volcari flare shot. It hit 3 meters behind him, blowing a crater in the stone path. Shards sliced his side. He dropped, gritting his teeth, heat swelling in his leg like someone had poured molten glass into the joint. His visor fuzzed, blinked red. Status beacon activated, his HUD announced. Voice sterile. Vital stabilization underway. He crawled backward with one arm, dragging his frame under a slab that had cracked off the ridge wall. The impact still echoed in his ears. Everything high and tinny. Blood smeared down his calf, dark and streaking through armor seams. Another flare burst in the sky, yellow this time. Emergency regroup signal. He tried to move, couldn't. Every attempt lit a nerve down his spine. Behind his visor, his jaw clenched so hard it felt like it might crack. On the shared line, he heard the rest of the team coordinating. Vox logs of shouted orders. Theron tapped his pad once, broadcasting injury sustained. Stable, last beacon transmission. Will proceed if able. Silence. Seconds passed, then minutes. No one acknowledged. Not even a ping. Somewhere above, engines ignited. Coalition shuttle profiles. He couldn't see them, but he could feel the low shift in atmospheric density, that momentary pressure change, just before climb-out. The Tarnik had left. His final comm entry read, "Sergeant, Theron Vak, medical beacon active, status, stabilizing." After that, nothing. Theron's helmet display dimmed, power saving mode initiated. He let his head rest against the stone. Sky above fractured in bands of gray and dark, like a battlefield stained into the atmosphere itself. Not chaos, not fire, just fatigue drawn across miles of violence. As heat bled from the rocks, the wind changed. A colder draft slipped in from deeper canyons. It carried the scent of decaying flora and static-charged minerals, the kind that clung to the tongue and turned breath metallic. A faint tremor shook the ground, distant, rhythmic, not natural, not friendly. Terran didn't flinch. His pulse slowed. His eyes remained open. 2 hours later, the last Terran evac shuttle lifted from the far ridge. No one mentioned the missing man. No one filed the beacon retrieval. It was buried under irretrievable asset, non-priority loss, by the Tarnic desk. Terran vac remained on Naros 7, buried in red dust, trapped under stone, shrapnel in his leg, system flickering like a dying star, but still breathing. And somewhere inside his chest plate, nestled beneath bone and reinforced weave, a low-frequency beacon continued to pulse, each wave embedding itself in the ionosphere. Query denied. Entity classified as non-priority loss. Entry code VAC17Z archived. No further action pending. That was the third dismissal in under 6 hours. Terran Command's liaison, Director Marin Solve, blinked against the ice-blue glow of the laser plasma display flickering above his desk. The air in his quarters had a recycled sharpness, dry from overfiltration. Nothing moved except the blinking transmission cue. No breath of dust. No sound except the muted tick of the report's final checksum loading. His fingers hovered above the console, hesitating before forcing a reply. Directive request. Full debrief on Terran vac. Last medical beacon transmission. Active. No casualty verification submitted. Coalition extract pattern. Incomplete. Clarify disposition. He watched the outgoing feed vanish into the relay buffer, just another node in a string of unanswered questions. No read receipt returned. Behind him the station's artificial sunlight dimmed for the cycle change. Outside, the Terran Forward Recon Outpost orbited Saverin's third moon in silence. The lights along the docking struts pulsed amber, maintenance override. On any other day a minor detail. Today it felt like a funeral lantern drifting in low gravity. Back inside the command suite, Marin opened the comm logs. Internal memorandum. Coalition Command classified Tier 4 timestamp, plus 0007, 1508, post exfil Naros 7 subject. Asset T-VAC, status inquiry, asset flagged during final combat engagement. Tarnic retrieval order referenced coalition-only extract. Terran presence listed as autonomous support. No override obligation recognized. Categorized as irretrievable asset per treaty subsection 2.7. Entry closure filed under non-priority. He paused the scroll. Autonomous support. Treaty subsection 2.7. Paper dagger language. Nothing in those clauses acknowledged flesh and blood. They had parsed a man into lines of data, diluted in semantics until the pulse beneath it didn't matter. Further down, the file included an attached code block marked Administrative Closure. It bore the Tarnic Coalition emblem, a series of nested angular shapes, almost like a maze if one stared too long. Below the seal, the header glowed faintly. Sector Archives, adjusted, beacon acknowledgement nullified. It meant they'd scrubbed his location tag from priority channels. Officially, Terran vac no longer existed in Tarnic airspace. Marin leaned forward, pulled up the Vanguard relay satellite feed from orbiting units above Naros 7. The flare data was still cached. 2 green, 1 yellow, final contact signals. VAC's transmission, now 2 days old, blinked in 30-second intervals, its waveform slowing with every update. Signal strength, weak status. Stabilizing retrieval suggested. Urgent. He exhaled once, long, tight, almost resentful. They wouldn't touch it. The Tarnic weren't fools, but they were bureaucrats of the worst sort. Those who believed logistics replaced loyalty. He'd seen this once before, on Iskar's fault line, when another non-priority soldier had died curled beneath a frost shelter waiting for a resupply that never came. They buried the body in documents, not soil. Marin keyed a separate channel. Velk, respond. The display opened, revealing Joran Velk hunched over a diagnostics terminal, his jacket half unzipped, data cores humming beside him, and eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. They buried it, Velk muttered without greeting. Used sector obscuration clause, means no orbital scans, no touchpoint advisories, no ping acknowledgements. It's sealed, doesn't even show up in search tree heuristics anymore. And the beacon, Velk turned, eyes tired but sharp, still transmitting, lower every cycle, but clean, no artificial distortion. That signal's not corrupted, it's just being ignored. Marin didn't reply at first, then quieter. Is he alive? Velk didn't guess. He reached over and dropped a secondary heads-up display onto the feed. On it the terrain grid of Naros 7 shivered with particle haze. The canyon area had cooled. EM static had dissipated. Beacon origin still centered in the same 20-meter range. He's breathing, Velk said finally. Or he was. 4 hours ago. They both knew what that meant. If the signal stayed active, Vac hadn't removed the chest plate. If the chest plate remained, so did the soldier. That single pulse had more conviction than the entire Coalition command's response. Any word from Coalition envoy Haas? Marin asked. Velk laughed under his breath, short and hollow. He sent a legal digest, 29 pages. Highlighted terms include collateral designation, relief clause exemption, and localized command sovereignty. Didn't mention Terran once. A silence filled the room. Not empty, tight, structured, thick like a vacuum after a hatch seal. Something unspoken lingered between the men, more final than frustration. Marin sent the final packet from his station. Outgoing comms directive, Terran Vanguard Echo Protocol recipient, Terran High Strategic Command. Vac beacon continues. Coalition denies retrieval. No support authorized. Coalition refusal archived. Classification requested. Loyalty breach. He watched the message vanish into the stream. In another sector, this would provoke internal reviews. In this one, it would be remembered. Far below, Naros 7 turned slowly beneath a haze of copper and muted charcoal. Inside the canyon, where blood had soaked the rocks, and the air still whispered with old kinetic discharge, a single locator continued to pulse, weak but unwavering. Thermals cooled, winds shifted again. The beacon clicked, just once, in a control room buried deep inside Tarnik's Sector 9 relay station. That click registered, not as a threat, not as a priority, just as noise. They filed it in an auxiliary log under beacon anomaly no action. The system auto-tagged it with a final identifier, status irretrievable, and nothing more. Zone 37, just flagged a body. East slope. The technician's voice was flat, as if reading ambient temperature. He didn't turn from the display, didn't react to the flickering shadow gliding across the perimeter scan. A second monitor stuttered, then aligned, catching a figure crawling into view through the haze, dark armor dulled by soil, gait broken, one shoulder dipped from fatigue or injury. On the top right of the feed, the timestamp blinked out of sequence. Frame skip. Static warped the next few seconds. Then the silhouette reappeared, closer. No transponder, no escort beacon. It's walking. The observation deck was low lit. The air pressed in close, filtered but dry, cold from the wall chill, never warmed by sunlight. Surveillance drones fed the room constantly, triangulated inputs bleeding into the heads-up matrix above the central console. 4 officers leaned in. None spoke. The figure moved like a memory dragged across fractured footage. Its left leg trailed behind the step. Not dragging, not limp, deliberate, like it hurt, but the pain didn't matter anymore. The cracked visor glinted once, when the canyon wall caught the daylight, only for a second. Beneath it, no face visible, just darkness, and blood dried thick across the neck latch. The figure kept walking. At checkpoint 1, the door opened before it arrived. No codes were entered, no proximity tags confirmed. The seal disengaged with a hiss, as if it expected him. A junior watchman, Tarnik by uniform, leaned forward, face pale. Did someone override the gate protocols? Negative, muttered the system's lead. There's no override request on the entry log. The footage continued. Checkpoint 2 came next. Thicker walls, reinforced sensor traps. Again the doors opened, half a second before contact. Inside the gate, motion-triggered lights flickered to life, then blinked out as the figure passed through, like each diode couldn't bear to watch. Silence hung in the control chamber, broken only by the irregular pulse of static from the drone audio. No footsteps reached the mic. No breathing caught in the filters. The man walked, and the station seemed to pull away from him, like stone giving way beneath weight too old to question. No one said his name yet. No one dared. The data core hallway was narrow, brushed steel with pulse indicators set along the base. As the figure entered, the corridor sensors stuttered and dimmed. Each step triggered a delayed light ripple, like the walls couldn't agree on his presence. At the third checkpoint, a pause. The camera above the security gate glitched, reloaded twice, then stabilized. He looked up, not to the guards, not to the door, to the lens. The room cooled. 3 seconds. His head tilted slightly, enough to register attention without acknowledgement. Then the last checkpoint door unlatched, sealed behind him, and shut. The surveillance officers exchanged glances, the unease now openly crawling up their spines. Why didn't it challenge him? One finally asked. Security reads blank. No forced entry, no code spoofing, no signal variance. Then how did he? I don't know. The sensor deck fell quiet again. One officer slowly approached the side terminal, pulling archival profiles from the beacon data. He didn't search by name. He searched by pulse signature. The database paused before responding. Match found. One result. Identity tag. Theron vac status. Stabilizing. Unknown location. Post-combat recovery beacon active response directive. Nullified by Coalition Protocol entry VAC 17Z. The display blinked once, then the screen dimmed and reset. Across the compound, environmental anomalies began to appear. A water filtration cycle overcompensated and shut down. Exterior motion lights began sinking out of pattern. The drone relays above Sector D re-registered their own timestamps with a 6-minute delay, as though they'd fallen behind time itself. And still, he walked. The central dome registered the first phase interference as he passed under it. A low whine, not mechanical, more like the pressure drop before thunder. But the air remained still, just colder. The man did not speak, did not gesture. He passed through the heart of the facility, like memory itself, uninvited, untouched, and real enough to unsettle the system. No weapon drawn, no threat made, yet every step bent the station's spine a little further downward. In a service hallway near subsection Gamma 2, an old technician, retired Navy rank, stood staring at a grainy loop on the feed display. I know that armor, he whispered to himself. That chest plate, that's Vanguard make Mark 7. The young assistant next to him frowned. That model's phased out, not for the forward units, not for those left behind. His voice was flat but brittle. They both watched the footage again. The cracked visor passed under a camera. For a moment, the reflection caught something, the faintest glint of red inside the darkness, like a low beam light trapped in deep water. The assistant swallowed. There's no way he walked from Volcari territory. No evac routes, no food, no meds. That terrain was his to leave. The technician turned off the screen. We just never expected him to want to. Outside the facility, the canyon stretched wide beneath a cloud-cloaked sky. Wind pushed ash across the rock in slow spirals, hiding bloodstains, burying markers, rewriting the geography in dust. No shuttle approached, no response came from Earth. Only one man, walking, unwelcome, undeniable, and watched. Even the cameras had begun to lag now, each new frame rendered with a micro-hitch, as if something behind the lens paused to reconsider what it was seeing. He reached the last hallway. Ahead, the sensor dome stood, a smooth black sphere, suspended above the main intelligence relay. It tracked movement, breath, identity, emotional markers. It cataloged allegiance. It couldn't lie. As he passed beneath it, the sphere rotated. The red tracking light blinked once. Theron Vac turned his head, slow, deliberate, and met it. It dimmed instantly. In the archive logs, the final image captured was not a man walking. It was a figure beneath a dead sensor, staring into the eye of the machine, and blinking last. Sector grid B9 just zeroed, muttered Darnikas, pulling back from the console like the display had spat heat at him. No surge, no discharge, just gone. He wiped his fingers on his sleeve, but they kept shaking. The sensor room inside the Tarnik Central Relay Hub wasn't built for surprises. Systems here ran with the consistency of a breathing pattern, one beat after another, always predictable, always maintained, until now. On the wall behind him, 3 technicians leaned in toward the heads-up plasma display where planetary status icons pulsed in cyan across the archipelago of star systems under Coalition governance. All but one. That one now blinked amber, not red, not hostile, just absent. "Tag it again," said Chief Officer Tassel Brav from the upper tier. "Run it through the ARC redundancy simulator. I want raw output." The operator to his right keyed in 3 commands. Nothing refreshed. The feed reloaded with an error strip scrawled across it in blue. Tegra 4 response timed out. No node signal. The air in the chamber felt wrong, not tense, not hot, emptied. Like something fundamental had been lifted from the room. Brav exhaled once, slow and sharp through his nose. "Pull the orbital watch. Let's verify visual." Across the chamber, the ceiling lens adjusted to feed in direct telemetry from the satellite clusters above Tegra 4, where orbital rings should have shown, rows of equatorial defense arrays set to auto-scan. There was static. One satellite flickered into focus for half a second. Then it spun off-center, unmoving, drifting, inert. Tegra 4, a population colony of over 6 million, lit by 16 independent energy cores, showed no heat bloom, no rotation data. Its comms relays emitted no pulses. It didn't go offline. It turned still, no explosions, no warning. One by one status pings across the system went quiet. Then another planet dimmed. Enter station just lost all net traffic, called another tech. No warning, no spikes. Their internal command net collapsed mid-cycle. Brav stepped back. "Bring up all neighboring grids. Watch for spread." Before the command finished echoing, half the wall went dark. The heads-up display segmented, cross-referencing emergency logs, except there were none. No warnings issued, no SOS beacons. Each grid vanished mid-cycle, like a breath held too long, then released into nothing. "Pull black signal intercepts," he said. "I want to see if this is Volcari." The officer manning the darkstream scanner shook his head. No spikes, no spectral burst, not even interference. "It's not attack, it's internal failure." Brav's voice flattened. "Systems don't fail symmetrically." The feed blinked again. This time, the third planet's orbital ring flickered with a figure. It appeared for less than 3 frames. No name, no markers, no motion, just a silhouette. Brav froze. "Replay that frame." They enhanced it. The figure stood near a power array junction, barely lit by the residual coil feedback. It wasn't interacting with the panel, it simply passed near it. The coil shut down a moment later. Another world dropped. 6 hours earlier, a low-level drone patrol over Naros 7 had recorded a man walking beneath a dead sensor dome. Now that shape echoed across 7 systems, each trail matching the angle, the gait, the stillness. One technician finally asked what no one else would say. "Is it him?" Brav didn't answer. He scanned the logs again. At the base of each collapse report, a new error appeared, never there before, buried beneath hundreds of system lines. VA key _null, no explanation, no description, just that phrase. Darnik Haas gritted his teeth. "Run a purge sequence. Delete anything tagged with that marker." "No effect," replied the operator. "Command path loops. Every purge rewrites back to origin state." "What origin?" The heads-up display went white. Every panel, every feed, nothing left. The room fell still. Even the filtration vents seemed to pause. Across the corridor, someone dropped a data slate. The clatter rang louder than it should have. Elsewhere in the sector, fleets blinked out of sync. Above Varn's station, a cruiser drifted off route, unable to align with its relay beacons. Its orientation software had scrubbed itself clean. Pilots navigated by instinct, until the guidance lights along the hull flickered once, then blackened. They called for command support. Command never answered. Inside a monitoring post on Sevek Minor, a junior officer watched the stars dim on her skyplate. One by one the navigation glyphs faded. The galaxy didn't change, but everything that told them where they were disappeared. No blast, no invasion, just silence and lightless stillness. At the Coalition's primary defense console, 3 counselors gathered before an auxiliary projection dome, now streaked with error hash. One of them, older, rigid in posture, whispered. No one even fired. Another responded. He didn't have to. Back in the relay room, Brav stood alone now. The others had been dismissed, or vanished to sword internal chaos. Before him, the last functional console displayed a looping archive of the man beneath the sensor dome. No motion, just presence. "Who planned this?" he asked the quiet chamber. A voice behind him, one of the security aides, quiet, unsure, offered, "It was never a plan, sir." "Then what?" A response. Brav turned back to the footage. Still frame, blood-worn armor, beacon flickering once every 5 seconds. No words spoken, no expression. The man walked, and the sector obeyed. As the last satellite blinked out, the screen fed one final line before losing power: recognition revoked. Then it all went black. "Shut it down now, or we lose the entire core." Tossel Brav's voice cracked across the relay chamber like snapped cable, his command colliding with a wall of static pouring from the primary data stack. Sparks hissed from the floor panels. The emergency dampers deployed too late, air filled with the sharp tang of burning polymer as heat rolled from the failing circuits. 3 techs sprinted to reroute node access. None succeeded. Laser plasma displays pulsed red above them, overloaded, jittering, bleeding error glyphs across lines of command script. Command structure 3A3 tried to reassert access. Too slow. Rejection code, vacay_nullar rewrite trigger, active source origin. Unknown. Brav didn't blink. He reached for the manual override on the nearest terminal, hand trembling. The keycard slot refused the input, just hissed and flashed a crimson arc. The screen beneath it flickered once more and rolled into an admin cycle loop. Initiate control reclaim _03A error. Control_03A_no_ exists source file. Overridden message header / nullar never leaves behind him. The command map collapsed piece by piece, each sector flashing blue, then vanishing into gray static. Entire planetary systems shrank into non-responsiveness. Borders rewrote themselves in real time. The sector was eating itself. "Get me a clean shell," Brav snapped, sweat trailing down his temple. "I want an isolated node, no netlink. We'll rebuild from bare code." One technician, young, sharp-jawed, still hoping logic could save them, shoved a data wedge into an auxiliary console. The screen flared white, then collapsed. Boot failure, root infrastructure, not found. Logic stack destabilized. Origin, permission granted by vacay_nullar. "No," the tech whispered, voice barely audible over the shriek of cooling fans dying. "It's recursive." "Recursive how?" "It's not erasing files, it's rewriting the command history itself. Makes it look like we never owned those sectors, like they were never logged to begin with." "Impossible," Brav snapped. The tech didn't answer. He was already unplugging the data wedge and burning it with the sterilizer coil. Across the upper screen deck, fleet telemetry began to vanish. Not just visual confirmation, but entire ship identities. The flagship Durathmorn flickered. Then its designation wiped from the command registry. When Brav searched it, nothing populated. Even backup directories responded with query invalid. "Asset does not exist. We've got AI loops," another tech called from the lower tier. "Core clusters are echoing internal logic. They're stuck answering themselves. Isolate the diagnostic net." "We did, 4 minutes ago." "Didn't matter." Brav turned to the system's AI. Its display readout blinked a frozen process string. Predictive failure integrity scan. Actual failure detected before initiation. Logic offset identified. Identifier flag. null_loop_01. The air tasted scorched. Something in the heat carried a dead static bite, as if the walls themselves were sweating old memories. Lights above dimmed. One by one, overhead beacons died without sound. Not a flicker, just absence. "Core cascade approaching," the deck officer warned. 15 seconds until thermal dump breach. "Shunt the archive vault." "We tried. The vaults don't respond. The system thinks they were never installed." Brav stared at the central column, the one bearing all Coalition archival structure. Now lines of code scrolled upward, lines he didn't authorize. No one did. His name was gone from the permission log. Every administrator's access showed revoked, backdated to 17 years prior. A timer now replaced the sector grid. Time since null activation, 0 hours 5 minutes and 32 seconds. Affected nodes, 214,013. Integrity status, lost. He slammed his fist into the side panel. No reaction. The terminal was dead wood now, still blinking but hollowed out. At the central communication tower, a fleet analyst screamed, not from injury, but despair. "The navigation records are gone." "What do you mean gone?" "We can't see where anything was. No star path, no orbital imprint, no galactic marker. Our entire travel network just dissolved. Brav turned slowly, the weight of that sentence cutting deeper than any breach. How far does it reach? The analyst's hands hung uselessly at his sides. His voice, when it came, cracked with confusion. There's no way to know. In the next moment, every screen in the room went black. Not in sequence, simultaneously. A second passed. Then a message appeared. Not loud, no alarm. Just text white on a field of utter black. Terran assets are never abandoned. Your map is no longer valid. Vac_null below the text. A red icon began to blink. A root-level system glyph that hadn't existed on any coalition interface prior to that moment. A symbol not known by the engineers, nor registered by the core design language. It blinked, then multiplied. Send the third envoy packet. Route it through a dead relay if you have to. Just get it to Earth. Rethentral's voice held no tremor, but the taut lines at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. His hand hovered above the dispatch seal embedded in the table's edge, knuckles pale, nails grimed from 8 straight hours of scrubbing code fragments off terminal surfaces that no longer responded. The chamber lights pulsed low, running off auxiliary circuits since the core grid dissolved the previous cycle. The air was dry, almost chalky, like it carried the dust of burned memory rather than ash. No scent, but the walls themselves tasted sterile, scrubbed of history. Tral turned to his comms officer, a younger man named Carden Voss, who'd stopped blinking at static 3 hours ago. Do we still show any diplomatic link routes? Voss checked the auxiliary heads-up relay. 2, maybe. Burn through channels only. They'll need to bounce against a civilian loop, scrape bandwidth off the Helios fringe, and hope the Terrans haven't firewalled their entry ports. Tral exhaled through clenched teeth and pressed the seal. The data packet launched with a low tone that seemed too soft for what it carried. Diplomatic transmission 114 Theta Beta origin. Tarnic Coalition, Council Annex subject. Sector reinstatement request. Urgent response required. In the interest of de-escalation and coordinated restabilization, the Tarnic Council formally requests diplomatic re-engagement with the Terran Assembly regarding recent system instabilities. Acknowledgement of Terran asset Vox survival was not withheld in malice, but emerged from a failure of tactical communication hierarchy. We propose joint resolution review, restoration of trade, nav data and shared comm lattice requested. Tral stared at the dispatch record as it blinked once, then stilled. The screen returned to black. The message was away. He leaned back in the seat that no longer synced with his identifier and watched the last functioning console slide into idle. The room around him buzzed, not with energy, but nervousness. Officers shifted without purpose. Pages flicked through old paper files. A nearby aide scribbled a system map by hand, uncertain of what quadrants still existed. No one knew what to do next. They waited, and Earth answered. Terran Central Assembly response transmission. No header prefix delivered via non-traceable pulse inject. Forced priority channel override single message body. No metadata. No identifiers. Tarnic declared Sector 7G through 11R. Status updated. Classification. UN recognized communication pathways. Severed data routes. Voided coalition identifiers. Removed memory registry. Redacted response complete. No further contact expected. The display pulsed once and went blank. Tral stepped forward and placed his palm on the black glass, as if pressure might force more words to surface. The warmth he expected wasn't there. The panel was cold now, dormant. He turned back to the room. Check alternate channels. Voss didn't move. I said check again. There are no alternate channels, Voss said quietly. They weren't kidding. They wiped us. No one wipes a sector off the register. They did. Silence settled in the room. The kind that isn't empty, but full of realization. Across the remaining data displays, identifiers began to vanish. Coalition seal codes dissolved from their own certificates. Sector stamps erased. Communications archives no longer recognized sender names. Even internal systems began triggering errors when officers attempted to log on. Access error. User not valid. Identity not acknowledged by federal map. The Terran registry, linked across all interstellar systems, had disconnected the Tarnic Coalition, not by force, but by erasure. They're not attacking us, Tral said. They've made us irrelevant. It's more than that, muttered Voss. Without Terran map architecture, We can't find our own stars. On a side panel, the registry assistant, a thin officer named Orvin, watched a list of trade partner networks vanish. His hands trembled as the last line blinked out. I can't even pull my own name from the system. The central archive, my whole record's gone. I don't exist on any channel that matters. Trowell stared at the pulsing glass, as though it might blink again. It didn't. They didn't declare war, he said, more to himself than anyone else. They just stopped acknowledging that we're here. Earth hadn't launched a fleet. They hadn't fired a weapon. They'd severed the coalition with 3 steps: strip identity, shut access, seal history. No retaliation came, because there was nothing left to retaliate against. As the room slipped further into stillness, the final heads-up panel displayed a single blank field. No requests, no alerts, no enemy, just a square of empty black. No border, no name, no future, unrecognized. I saw him pass. I didn't breathe for 12 seconds. The voice came from Draven Kell, recorded 2 days after his debrief began. His image flickered on the heads-up panel, gaunt, soaked in shadows, speaking under the dull flicker of a failing ceiling strip. His uniform was unfastened at the neck. The coalition symbol stitched over his shoulder was frayed. The interview had no formal structure. Each segment clipped together, like memories that refused to align. He didn't limp, not the way wounded men do. His foot landed wrong every 3rd step, but the rest of him, it moved like time, followed him, instead of the other way around. Cut. Draven again, now sitting forward. I raised my weapon, not to shoot, just instinct. I think I believed the motion would matter, but my hand locked up, couldn't finish the arc. Cut. I've seen Volcari berserkers eat through reinforced steel. I've seen Deep Zero prisoners set fire to air. But this was something else. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't even look. I just wasn't in his path. The screen dimmed. A soft tone marked the end of his testimony. Another file auto-queued. This one, internal maintenance log, level 9 systems recovery, coalition infrastructure, substation, core 4. Technician Reldon Voss's voice cracked over the line, half whispered, half defeated. We ran cold starts on the nav bank 8 times, different boot orders, power-fused patch cables, nothing held. Every time the system reached authentication, the directory tree unraveled. It's like the stars we used to name our path didn't want to belong to us anymore. A brief clip showed him flipping a manual star map open across a candle-lit terminal. Yes, candles. No active lighting remained on the lower levels. Flame and shadow had returned to replace ions and diagnostics. He scrawled route markers with a dull stylus, dragging his finger across the map as if retracing something ancient. I tried aligning us by constellation overlay, cross-referenced archived pulses. The sky doesn't respond. It's still there, but it stopped letting us speak. Cut. Officer Mevrickthand sat against a wall lined with broken panels. His armor was scratched in swaths, clean blood smears, marking where the chest plate had once reflected drone lights. We thought he was just lost. A soldier who came back with a grudge, maybe a message. But there's no message, just movement, just effect. He rubbed at his eyes. Behind him, a fire crackled from a fuel cell casing split open and stacked with dry emergency rations. One of our crew, Vekram, he stared at the silhouette too long, froze in place. When I shook him, he asked, what name would undo a city? Then he stopped speaking for the next hour. Cut. An atmospheric clip showed a corridor on Station Yera 12. No voices, only static leaking from a half-burned speaker. The footage panned slowly, as security feed replayed over a laser plasma display. In the center of the hall, a single candle stood lit beneath a helmet, Terran Vanguard design, cracked visor, blood dried across the brow plate. A handwritten message lay beside it. He walked past, and the lights forgot their purpose. The camera zoomed no further. It remained on that image, until the candle went out. Next cut. A diplomatic scribe, hands shaking as he tried to read the last Terran registry entry before the system deleted itself. Their response wasn't fury, he said quietly. It was absence. They didn't strike us. They removed themselves. As if we'd failed some exam, and were no longer permitted to recall the question. One more clip. An old Coalition Marine, sitting on the edge of a bed frame, fingers intertwined, knuckles calloused and burned. He walked through a shield gate, full lockdown, not even blinking. Those gates hold against solar flares. They opened before he reached them. It wasn't override tech, wasn't brute force. He glanced at the floor. I think the systems recognized something the rest of us refused to. Another cut. A lone sensor operator stared into her blank terminal, surrounded by scratched helmets, old weapons, and map overlays she could no longer follow. They called it vk_null in the error logs, she said, voice calm. But it wasn't an error. It was a memory. A protocol older than our treaty with Earth. Something they wrote in their bones, not in code. Cut. Now a joint command table deep within a decommissioned hub. Officers stood in a dim room, illuminated only by projected outlines of what the Coalition used to control. Nothing functioned. Troll's voice came over the black screen speaker. We feared their weapons, feared retaliation. What we never considered was the possibility that humanity never needed to raise a hand, that they trusted their silence more than our action. At the table's center, a stone sat where a command console used to be. Not a tool, a reminder. Someone had scratched a phrase into its surface. If they leave one behind, they erase the map. No one could confirm who carved it. No sensor registered the moment. No camera had seen the hand. But every officer there knew what it meant, and why it would never be said aloud. He's not in the registry anymore. Moriknal tapped the heads-up interface, but the file tree remained unchanged, flat, blank, as if the person they were searching for had never pulsed through the system. The man on the screen had dissolved, not into death, but into something less accessible, untraceable, not lost, removed. Beside him, the data link technician rubbed at the stubble lining his jaw, watching the command window cycle queries that all returned null. He jumped from the Chiron gate 2 cycles ago. That's confirmed. Gate logs still held long enough for the pulse echo. Which gate arm? Morik asked. 3, civilian transport. The kind no one scans too closely. And no exit record. None. Not even a partial arrival ping, like he threaded into subspace and never punched through the far side. Morik leaned back. The chair creaked. An old thing. Plastic mold reinforced with carbon ribs, brittle from years of silent use. He folded his arms, eyes locked on the empty signal trace, watching the final flicker replay in a loop that never moved beyond the timestamp. Beacon signal termination. VAC.001. Location. Undefined. He remembered watching the sector collapse, not from warheads, not from weapons, from the absence of one man's position. That signal, the one embedded in a soldier's chest plate, stitched beside his lung and synced to his breath, had shaped the course of an entire region, and now, it was gone. We scrubbed the comm logs, said the tech. He didn't speak, didn't register a purchase, just walked onto the platform. His armor still had T-markings, bloodstains washed but not cleaned, no ID tag. The tech shook his head. He wore a cloak over the plate. Transit cameras caught the folds, torn, edges heat-sealed by hand. No unit insignia. Morik reached over, pulled the gate terminal logs, and dragged open the archived video. The clip was short. The man appeared only for a moment, his back to the feed, head slightly bowed. The gate matched. Slow, mechanical, not labored, decided. Then entry. A pulse, one long echo from the beacon embedded in his chest. No flare, no activation. Just a whisper into the gate's anchor loop, almost reverent, and then, disappearance. No trace past the singularity. I want this recorded, Morik said, voice low, classified. Final entry. The tech nodded and began the encryption protocol. Morik activated the black signal relay, keyed in his ID, and opened a final log under Earth's autonomous monitoring directive. His voice, steady despite the weight it carried, filled the chamber. Black signal report, VAC_null, termination event. Sergeant Theron Vac entered Gate 3 of the Chiron Deepway Terminal at 0632 Standard Time. Final beacon echo logged. No exit signal detected. No registry match. Transit record, classified under non-return anomaly. As of this record, Vac is untraceable. Final directive status, complete. Sector redesignation remains in effect. Coalition identifiers remain expunged. Terran doctrine satisfied. vac_null operation concluded. He leaned back, letting the terminal seal the record. The air in the room shifted, barely. That soft change when something final is said aloud. Not final like death, but like a door being locked from the other side. The tech, still hovering by the panel, hesitated before speaking. You think he meant to vanish? No, Morik answered. He meant to leave. Same thing, isn't it? Morik studied the screen. No visuals now, only the aftermath of a presence erased by its own command trail. No, he said again, quieter. Vanishing is what happens when others forget you. Leaving is what happens when you decide they're not worth remembering. Outside the station, the gate loomed, an arc of gravity-warped alloy set against black stars and drifting comets. It glowed faintly, powered by solar webbing that hadn't dimmed in 2 decades. Inside its registry, one beacon pulse remained archived as the final log before a forced memory lock rewrote the departure lane's identifier. Passenger code, null entity destination, non-charted space. Later that night, long after the last technician had gone silent, someone left a slip of paper on the edge of the gate's anchor rail. It wasn't official, wasn't sanctioned, but it remained. Written in Terran field ink, still smudged from weather exposure, the note read, "He walked through time with a wound that never slowed him." The paper fluttered once in the artificial wind, then stilled, just like the man it remembered, unfound, unfollowed, unforgotten. He didn't blink. The whisper floated across the lower decks of Bunker Corvarn like smoke caught between old stone and corroded data wire. No one admitted who said it first. By the time command traced the phrase, it had spread through 4 frontier posts, jumped systems via handwritten memos, and etched itself onto the back of a trainee's ration tray. One moment, it was hearsay. The next, it lived in every shadowed corridor. They called it the vac ghost. Not a person, a moment, a warning. Recruits at Outpost Nellen 5 passed the tale in fragments. One claimed his uncle saw the silhouette walk across a bridge that no longer existed. Another swore the helmet was never worn. It hovered, slightly above the soldier's shoulders, like the man had outgrown the body beneath. Most of them didn't believe the facts. They believed what the silence left behind. "If they leave one behind," whispered a cadet named then Sorik, tracing circles in red chalk on a cracked wall panel, "they erase the map." His voice trembled not from fear, but from understanding. Across the galaxy, former coalition systems attempted reconstruction. Without Terran registry, they could not re-enter trade lanes. Without nav reference, they couldn't find their own allies. Not lost, just deleted. Inside an abandoned defense dome on Krenkat's 7th moon, General Solgar Vel stood before an erased sector chart. The top layer of the heads-up panel no longer responded, so he'd resorted to physical reference, an old sheet of starpath foil, where once entire regions blinked with stations, mining outposts, civilian arcs, only black now stretched between coordinates. He picked up a stylus and circled the area where Tarnik Command used to sit. His hand trembled slightly as the motion ended. Then, quietly, he dragged the side of his palm across the circle. The ink vanished beneath the smudge. He left it like that. Behind him, his aide finally spoke. "Why didn't they retaliate?" "They didn't need to." "You think it was pre-planned?" Vel turned, voice low and dry. "I think they had the plan ready long before they ever needed it. They just hoped they wouldn't use it." Another silence passed between them. Not the quiet of fear, but the weight of reflection, when denial finally runs out of places to hide. Later that night, inside the eastern barracks of Kesh Delta, 2 officers reviewed an intercepted transmission fragment from an old Terran surveillance node. The audio was broken, distorted by deep-wave radiation and relay rot, but one line came through uncorrupted. A male voice. Calm, measured. "Terran assets are never abandoned." Neither officer said a word. The display above them dimmed, then cracked faintly across the corner. Not from damage, but from power bleed. The infrastructure degrading from a command signal embedded years earlier. In the following days, bunkers began shutting themselves down, not from malice, but memory. Gate locks stopped responding. Power relays failed to route. It wasn't sabotage, it was subtraction. The systems, designed to recognize their place within a larger network, no longer believed they belonged to one. And still, the whispers spread. Draven Kell's Old Testimony was translated into 13 languages, not formally, through voice-to-voice recountings. Across long walks, over cold meals, under broken ceilings. He didn't breathe, just walked. By the third cycle of the blackout, his words were chiseled into the wall of a bunker chapel where no sensors remained. Lit only by candles shaped from cooled reactor wax, soldiers sat in silence beside the phrase. No ceremony, just presence. Stories evolved. Some said the man didn't bleed. Others insisted he never blinked because there was no need. One legend claimed that every step he took unraveled a lie the galaxy had agreed to live with. But one truth remained. The phrase, it surfaced in every forgotten quarter of the Tarnic sector. It found its way into boot soles, into mess hall trays, into the grain of scratched helmets. If they leave one behind, they erase the map. In one forgotten post along the edge of space no longer marked, a young conscript stood before a chalkboard and drew a circle. He pointed to it. This was us. Then he picked up a cloth and wiped it away. No one laughed, because they knew, somewhere out there, a soldier had walked beyond gates, across systems, beneath stars that refused to catalog him. Not to bring war, but to leave something behind. A message, written not in voice, not in vengeance, but in deletion. When Coalition archives were reviewed 10 years later by a third-party observer from the Concord Interim Committee, they found something strange buried inside an unconnected server drift satellite. A non-operational entry marked with no timestamp and no source. One line, no formatting. He returned. So we disappeared. The report was never published. But even the observer who read it, Valen Drex, a neutral statistician from a diplomatic family line, never mentioned the incident again. He burned his notes, declined reassignment, left public service entirely. What remains now is myth. Not about who Theron Vac was, but about what Earth became the moment they learned the cost of silence. They didn't demand revenge. They didn't raise a fleet. They removed the coordinates, so no one could ever ask again where they went, or why they'd never come back. And across those forgotten corridors, with no flag, no anthem, no threat, only the memory of a man who returned when he shouldn't have. The galaxy learned what it meant to leave one Terran behind, and why no one ever would again.